All righty, all righty. Well, I got to tell you, I am fired up here today. I am here with Cindy Baker. We are going to talk about how to overcome the overwhelm as a coach. And I know we have got a lot of people on here who are listening to this. You might already know that my name is Brian Hilliard. And one of the things that I really love talking with people about is what they can do to be able to expand their reach, impact more lives, get their message out to a wider audience. But part of the problem is we can find ourselves in this overwhelmed state. And Cindy is going to talk to us a little bit about what the heck we can do to get out of Dodge. Cindy, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome, 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 awesome. Well, one of the things that we talked about when we first discussed this was ADHD, right? And you had mentioned, you had shared that that was something that you have, and that's something that you work with other people on, excuse me, who have it as well to continue to be successful. But also that we were talking just before we got on, that a lot of these things are through lines, whether you have ADHD or not, right? Like, and I put it
Right.
into air quotes because like whatever, just because you're diagnosed with one thing versus the other doesn't necessarily mean anything. You know what I mean? So being able to do some of those different things, I think makes a whole lot of sense. So first of all, talk to me a little bit about what it is that you teach your clients who are maybe struggling with ADHD and maybe they own their own business and gosh, they've got a lot going on and maybe a condition that makes them susceptible to certain things. How do you teach this to be successful?
Yeah, that's a great question because whether they have ADHD or not, if you're an entrepreneur, you're spinning a lot of plates
Right,
and you are very susceptible to that common experience of feeling overwhelmed.
right,
All the things, So you and I talked before about how sometimes we live in two different time periods, now and not now.
right,
And so our brain tends to be reactive and it's going to react to whatever is in our immediate vicinity, whether it's priority or not, whether it's been put on a planner or not. If you're working on something and an interruption grabs your attention, you're going to follow that rabbit trail sometimes. And so one of the things that I teach is to work on one thing at a time.
okay,
And that sounds very simple. Like, why do you need a coach to tell you that? But it's amazing how many people will not do that. And so we think that we're being more productive by multitasking. But neuroscience is very clear that you are less efficient when you multitask. And in fact, your brain is actually doing what we call switch tasking, where
right.
you're switching from one thing to another. I did an exercise not too long ago, and some of your listeners may want to try this. But if you draw a line on a piece of paper and you take 20 seconds to write the word multitask on the top of the line, and then draw another line and time yourself for 20 seconds and write the same word, but write one letter on the top of the line and one letter underneath the line. So you would write M on top, U on, and just the
Oh,
thought of doing that, you realize, I mean, the act of doing that, you realize that your brain had to work so much harder to
interesting.
switch from going to the top of the line to the bottom of the line.
Right.
So we're really fooling ourselves by thinking that we're being more efficient when we multitask. So that's one thing. I always encourage them to write everything down.
Okay.
And one of the tricks is just to use your voice recorder on your phone. So if you're
I was
driving,
going to say that. Yeah, a
just do
voice to
like a
text.
brain dump and
Yeah,
just, when you get back, then you can make your list. And it
right,
can even be things like a grocery list or
right,
get that stuff out of your brain that's rattling around and
right.
write it down, write everything down. Um, Another thing I suggest is not to have a giant to-do list. You
Okay,
pick three things. You're only allowed, if you had to boil everything down to, I'm only allowed to put three things on my list for the day.
okay.
What would they be? And that forces you to prioritize. And of course, as an entrepreneur, you want your revenue producing activities to be top priority. You don't want to spend
Right.
3 hours making a perfect graphic in Canva,
Right.
when you really need to be doing something else. And so you're allowed to add 2 more things if you finish those 3, but you start with 3. And
That,
it
oh, go ahead.
irritates people to death because they're like, I can't pick 3. I've got this huge list, but it's a great exercise to try to discipline yourself to do that.
That's great because I think you said a lot of good things in there. The three, I'm going to go back and kind of into the middle. One of the things you talked about, multitasking, which is we took a course. Well, actually, my girlfriend did. Darren Hardy. He is I don't know if he's still the publisher of Success Magazine, but he got out there and he did insane productivity. Okay. And one of the points that he made was that the switching costs,
Yes.
because what happens is your brain is trying to go back and forth, and we think, I guess, that we're getting an edge on the day or the task or the list, or I don't know what we think, but we're thinking that we're trying to get an edge on this, and if anything, it's the exact opposite. We would be better off just doing one thing at a time than trying to do 3 things simultaneously, or bip, 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 bip. So I love that point. And the other point that that you were bringing up was the idea of you've got different people who have different perspectives, obviously, on things, and they're trying to do different things and be successful. And those 3 things can be so tough for a lot of people, right? Because they're like, oh, to your point, what are the 3 things I'm going to do, or this, that, and the other? Talk to me about how you feel about time blocking, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, whether it's left or right, that's fine. But because for me, my thought is, and especially that voice to text, when you're kind of getting it out of your head and doing into that thing,
Mhm.
how do you feel about taking those 3 things and saying, all right, this is my marketing time, 3 things are in there, and I'm going to spend, the next 90 minutes knocking that out. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, time blocking is great. Um, I do it myself, and I recommend it to my clients, because kind of going back to the multitasking, why we do that is we get bored easily.
Right,
And we also don't like to do things that are difficult. And so once it starts
right,
to get to that point where makes us think too hard, we get difficult, then let me check my email, and
right,
we do some avoidance tactic. And
right.
one way to avoid that is to schedule breaks. And I don't mean
Oh,
breaks, but when you are time blocking, put in a little 15-minute buffer and say,
I hear that.
this is going to be my time to get up and walk around outside or
Right,
whatever.
right.
That helps, but time blocking is great because, you've heard the saying, if it's not on your calendar, it doesn't happen.
Most of the case, that's true.
And so you have to be intentional about your time. If you don't
Right,
control your schedule, somebody else will. There's
right,
always going to be something that you're reacting to.
right.
I tell people, don't check your email first thing in the morning,
I
because
agree with that.
yeah, because then you're starting your day responding to somebody else's agenda.
I
You know,
totally agree with
so
that.
time blocking is a great, and I think as an ADHD person, we tend to be visual.
Right.
And so it's just seeing an actual square
Okay.
time block is helpful because, excuse me. So let's say you had a doctor appointment at 2
Right.
o'clock.
Right.
In the past, I would just write or type 2 o'clock doctor appointment, and I would just put it horizontally on that line. But if you think about it, you have to get there 15 minutes early, fill out the
Yep.
paperwork. Maybe
Yep.
it's a 30-minute drive and you got to find parking. And
Right.
then, they make you sit back there in the waiting room forever.
For
And
like
then they
10,
sit in
15
the
at least.
exam room. And then,
Yeah.
so technically you really should block off, 1:30 to 3 or
At
something like
least.
that.
I
Yeah.
was thinking like 2 to 3 hours,
Yeah.
because then you got to get back home, traffic. Yeah.
Yeah, because if
Yeah.
you don't, then what happens is you end up scheduling things too close together with no buffer.
Right. Right.
And then one thing goes awry and it's like dominoes and your
That's
whole
right.
day is thrown off and you live just in this high state of stress all day.
You
And so
know,
having margin is so
right.
important, and time blocking really helps with that. So I'm
You
a
know,
fan of time blocking.
it's so interesting. I wrote a book on how to overachieve without overcommitting. The first edition was 2006, wound up updating it just actually this year. And I remember like they didn't have, I don't remember hearing time blocking until relatively recently, like the last 5 to 10 years.
Mhm.
I don't remember hearing it in 2004 or three or six or anything like that. But like it is a terrific way of going about it. It is, you know what it's like? It's like a dog, a nifty little creature. Like everybody should be able to own a dog if you're not allergic to it. It is just a
I
fantastic
have
creature.
to.
Yeah, we do too. It's a fantastic creature. Okay. You don't want a small dog, get a large one. Don't want a large, get a medium one. Don't want you have allergy issues, get one that's just short hair. It's a fantastic creature. Okay. And I think I would say time blocking is the equivalent to having a dog. Like it's just once you have it, you don't know what you did without it. And it really structures your day in a way. And I love your point about email in the morning, which actually brings me to another question. I jotted it down. Talk to us a little bit about the importance, I think you would agree with this, of getting off to a good morning and having a relatively smooth entree into your day versus, so we're getting maybe into a little bit of a morning routine conversation if you want to go down that road or however you want to tackle that. But like versus, you know, getting up and, you know, running to the car, getting the kids together, like all of these other parameters. What's your deal on the morning routine and getting off to a good morning and how that kind of plays into this idea of not getting so overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think the morning is key because it does set the tone for the rest of the day. If you don't start your day on a positive note, the whole
Mm,
rest of the day, it's going to be really difficult to do that later.
right,
So, um, as you and I talked about before, I was a teacher and a school counselor for many years. And I, several years ago, started this business as well while I was still teaching. And so, if I didn't have a good morning routine, I would have been just a ball of stress all this because I was teaching middle school for one thing. And then I would, come home and get on Zoom calls or whatever, and I had to be my best. And so one thing that I started doing, well, a couple of things. I started just walking the dogs around the block. It wasn't so much for exercise because it's not a very long walk, but it
right,
was just something to get my body moving, to breathe
right,
some fresh air.
right.
It was like think time.
And it also probably just to interject for a moment there, Cindy, did it reset you a little bit, if you don't mind
Yeah,
me
it's
asking?
almost like I don't know, there's something about my ADHD brain sometimes thinks better when I'm moving, you know,
Okay,
whether it be
okay,
in the car or walking or
okay,
something. It just helps me think better and I'm more
okay.
creative. Another thing that I started doing is keeping a gratitude journal. So I
Oh,
started every
good.
morning writing.
Yeah,
I've gotten a little off of that, but I'm starting to kind of slowly add that back in.
I hear
But
that.
that whole year that I did that, I wrote down 10 things every day that I was grateful for. And I tried to
Yeah,
think of something different every time. And it could
right,
be something like, I'm thankful for health insurance because I have a
right,
doctor's appointment today, or I'm
right,
thankful for
right,
the the birds that are at the bird feeder out the window because I love watching them. That's kind of nerdy, I guess, but um, it just little things. It doesn't have to be big things. But what that did is that it started my day already feeling grateful and kind of leaning towards the positive because there's
right.
so many negative things about teaching
Yeah,
and kids these days. And um, if you get intentional about what you think about, then that does affect your emotions and it affects your behavior. And we could go off on we could have a whole podcast on that, but
No, I love that. I think, so it sounds like definitely you are a subscriber to the Good Morning. Sounds like definitely you are a subscriber to or an advocate of the Smooth Start. And it sounds like you're an advocate of the morning routine. For me, I obviously agree with all the things that you said. I know for me, and I actually wound up putting this in because I talked about the second edition. Um, I actually think I wound up putting it in one of the chapters, which is interesting because, like, if you had asked me that literally 10 years ago, I didn't do it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And one of my morning routine, and it's different for everybody, right? But depends on if you have kids. It depends on if it's school, if it's summer. My morning routine involves getting up. I go to the bathroom. Actually, before any of that, I wind up petting the cats. The cat comes on and they want to have a conversation about petting and purring. And one cat's here, another one goes there. So we'd get that, then go to the bathroom, then I'll go and walk the dogs. Then I'll go, come back. I'll usually, I'm a spiritual person, so I'll usually get into the word, see what's going on there. Then I will do some stretching. Sometimes I'll do some meditation. I've done that. I haven't done that recently, but I do that. I actually have a massage gun that I've been doing more lately on. But it's having, what I found is, and this is going to be a premise to the next question, because this was something that I struggled with. And it'd be interesting to hear your perspective as well. What I found was that when I had a routine that didn't involve me going all over the place, didn't have me involved with email, did have me focused on where I was and what I'm all about, and I didn't really have to think about it. That's the other thing, because it's such a routine. You're a little bit on autopilot. You're kind of gliding through the morning, right? You're not like, okay, what's next? You're just kind of like gliding, like skating through that time frame. And I found that when I had that, I was more relaxed. Here's my follow-up question for you on that, based off of my personal experience. When I was very, very stressed, and people don't believe me, but it's true. I was very, very stressed. It didn't have anything to do with the money. Yes, we're making more money now, but that was not it. That was not it. It was an approach that I took. Erroneously, it turned out. Okay. And when I was in that state, probably going back maybe 10 years ago, 8, 10 years ago, probably nine or 10 years ago, is I would, excuse me, I realized that when I was on the weekends, I was more stressed than during the week. Some of our listeners might be able to, might be able to find common ground with this. When I was on the weekends, I was more stressed than when I was during the week. And I was trying to figure out what the reason was. And here was the reason for me, and I'd love to get your thoughts, and maybe I was the norm or not, was what I realized for me was it wasn't that the weekend was stressful, it was the lack of a work routine on the weekend that was
Right.
stressful. And so what happened was I was in this kind of like abyss, awash of all the things that I could talk about and do about, go about, that created a degree of stress. Whereas on the week, I didn't have that. Get up, get to the shower, do this. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what's your take on that? Or did you find that? Or maybe your clients find that?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I work with my clients on is creating structure, because our brains crave structure. And
Right,
you have ADHD, you like to be a free spirit, and you're like, structure, that just sounds so constrictive. But
right,
um, so many of them, especially the ones that tried to start a business working from home, and
right,
all of a sudden they don't have an office, or during the pandemic they're working from home and they didn't have an externally imposed structure.
right,
They didn't know how to create it on their own, and without it they wasted a ton of time, and then they were frustrated. They were mad at themselves. They, at the end of the day, you'd like to be able to lay your head on the pillow and think, I met all my goals for the day. I mean,
right,
that's the ideal. And so I think you're absolutely right. So many times well, a couple of things. One, we don't create a weekend structure
Right.
a lot of times. And then secondly, we try to do too much. We think all of the things that I
Right.
didn't have time to do during the week, I'm going to have to do them on the weekend. And
Right.
I would go back to those three things, you know.
Interesting.
I mean, in the summer, you know, if some people pay people to do stuff for them, like cut the grass or whatever. But if you're doing that, and then you've got a meeting, and then you've got some catch up work or whatever, you can't do everything that you meant to do for the month in one Saturday, you
Right.
know.
Right.
And so and my husband's funny because he's like, you try to plan my weekend for me. And I'm like, but you have to plan, you know. And he's like, no, it's the weekend. And I
Right.
think he's come around a little bit to realize that that lack of structure, he's not as productive. And so you have to create structure, and you have to have habits, like going back to what you said
Right.
about the morning being automatic. Um, One of the things that I teach people is to plan patterns. And so, and this comes from the book Driven to Distraction, which is
Okay.
a great ADHD book
Okay.
by Dr. Um, Rady. I think his name's
Okay.
Ratey. Anyway, what that is just creating a specific time that you do a specific thing, and then you repeat that pattern. So I'll
Okay.
give you an example. I do laundry on Wednesdays.
Right.
Today is Wednesday when we're recording this. So I got laundry in there. I
Right.
just do it on Wednesdays. I don't think about it. And then I do it on the weekend. So on Saturday, and this is if I'm home, but on Saturday I'll do, sheets and towels and dog blankets and stuff. And on Sunday, I'll do clothes. And then on Wednesday, I do clothes and towels. And that way I'm not thinking it's not taking up bandwidth in my brain
Right.
to figure out to make a decision. Like you can get
Right.
decision fatigue.
Yes,
What
you
day
can.
am I going to do laundry?
Yeah.
How am I going to plan? It's just what I do. It's a pattern that I planned.
That's
And
interesting.
there's ways that you can incorporate that into your business as well.
Right.
But the less decisions that you have to make over small things, then the
Right.
bandwidth you have left to make the big decisions that you need to in your
Right.
business.
That's a
We
great
don't
point.
think about
Oh,
brushing
sorry.
our teeth, it's
Right.
automatic
Right.
because we've pre-decided. And
Right.
you can do that with things that you want to be disciplined about as well. Like you mentioned before that you play basketball sometimes early in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, you probably pre-decided that the night before. So
I
you put
most certainly
stuff
did. I
out,
played
you
this
set your
morning.
alarm,
Yep.
you know what I mean? And then it's easier to go ahead and just do it because you've already put all the things in motion.
Right.
And and so you can do that with your business as well. And you
That
can
is awesome.
pre-plan things and then not have to decide, like I just send a newsletter once a week. It's the same
Right.
day every week. And I don't
Yeah.
think about it. I don't
Right.
think about when am I going to send a newsletter.
Right. Right. Right.
So
You know
I
what?
could say more about that, but that's kind of
No.
it in a nutshell.
That I love that because I think what happens is, maybe some of our listeners like, okay, so there's certainly something that you want to be looking at. Maybe I go to this networking event, maybe I don't, right? But it's not a game day decision. Like you should know the week before, in most cases, whether
Mhm.
you're going to do this or not. Okay. And I love that just pre-planned thing. Even something as simple as not like I don't like canceling meetings or rescheduling meetings. Just as a now, I will say this with that just said, I have rescheduled meetings if it just turns out that the day is just becoming too much. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, okay, because normally on a day you'll have at least one person reschedule on. If you have 6 meetings, somebody will reschedule. Now, interestingly enough, today no one's rescheduled. So this is actually one of those days where 6 meetings.
Yeah.
Okay. But like normally, if you have 6 calls or you're doing some interviews or you're just coaching or whatever, normally somebody reschedules with you. But I think that the idea, getting back to the overcoming the overwhelm, a lot of times, and I love that decision fatigue, a lot of times what happens is we come from this place of trying to do every single thing. And it's like you don't have to figure all of it out. You just
Yeah.
You don't have to figure it all of it out. You just go because you know what you're going to do, and you go from there. One last point that I want to make is, and we talked about this, and I would be remiss if we didn't bring it up, which is this big picture progression that we kind of talked about before, off air. And it has to do with, and I'll let you explain it, but it has to do with why a lot of people maybe don't feel like time management has worked for them. And it turns out that maybe they're going about it in the reverse order. Unpack that a little bit, if you don't mind, in terms of how ADHD might actually be, or probably is, the root cause of some of this, because I think that will help some people out.
Yeah. Most people don't think, well, I need to manage my time better. They just think I'm overwhelmed. And maybe the culprit is time management. But what I found is when I work with people with ADHD, the time management gurus out there and all of the normal trainings that you get on time management don't work for them. And then they get frustrated and they get down. They're like, what's wrong with me? Well, it's because they weren't designed for an ADHD brain. And one of my big philosophies is to help people understand the way their brain is wired so that they can work with it and
Right.
actually leverage the strengths instead of fighting against it and trying to be somebody that they're not. I mean, we could have a whole nother podcast on all of the famous successful people that are creatives that have ADHD and actually attribute their success to having ADHD. And it's
Right.
because they figured out how to work with it and
Right.
embrace it. I get so irritated when I get in these supposed support groups for ADHD, and it's just a big whine fest. People just
Right.
want to complain, and
Right.
they make all these, silly reels and TikTok videos and say,
Right.
oh my, here's my brain on ADHD. And it's like, no,
Right.
it's not. You're just lazy.
Right.
Or you're
Right.
just, that was a dumb decision or whatever.
Right.
But
Right.
we can't blame everything on ADHD because it can actually be a competitive edge and entrepreneurship. If you learn how to work with it, you can leverage things like hyper focus, where you really
Right.
hone in on something that you're passionate about and interested in, and
Right.
block out everything else and really
Right.
be super productive. Because a
Right.
lot of people with ADHD are very intelligent and very creative.
Hmm.
It just gets overlooked because people want them to be organized in the way they think they should.
That's
I
exactly
saw that
right.
in the classroom all the time. Kids who were not making good grades, but I could tell they were smart. You know,
Right.
you give them a pen and paper and they'd be drawing this elaborate art piece
Right.
instead
Right.
of doing their work. But, that art could make them a lot of money one day.
That's
So,
exactly right. That's
yeah,
exactly right. I think, it was interesting when we talked about it, because you were like, ADHD can be a preceding factor. That's the driver of a lot of the things that causes people, if we think of it as a progression, that causes people to struggle with their time management. They struggle with their time management, things stack up. They then are like, oh, I need to go get another time management tool because that's what I need. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And
yeah,
or to your earlier point, bad me. I can't believe I'm so bad. You know what I mean? And then they try to do this, and then they start feeling overwhelmed again, and they go right back into the
yeah.
cycle. But
There's so many
ADHD,
things that have to do with time management that ADHD people struggle with. And the underlying factor and the driving factor is ADHD. Like they
right,
tend to wait until the last minute to do things and then
right,
kick it into high gear,
right,
crank things out. And
right.
that's a very stressful way to live. They
It
overcommit
is.
themselves in their schedule. They've got FOMO and they want to sign up
Right,
for every, shiny object that they come in contact with. They spend all this money on courses that are still sitting in their inbox that they have never even watched. Um, and so that sense of overwhelm comes from things piling up,
Right.
which comes from not managing their time, and the not
Right.
managing their time comes from ADHD. And
Right.
some people think, well, if I just go get a diagnosis, I can get on medicine, everything will be fixed. No. And whether you take medicine or not, that's between you and your doctor, but pills are not skills. And so you've
Right.
got to learn the skills of ADHD friendly time management. And the
Right.
interesting thing is, I've had people go through my program that don't have ADHD, but they
Interesting.
found what I teach, it works for them. And so I
That's
think if you're an
interesting.
entrepreneur, you still probably have that kind of brain,
Right.
even if you're not on the spectrum, you know?
Interesting. Well, tell us a little bit about your program. What's that all about? I'm sure people are asking themselves this.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for asking. So I have a group coaching program. It's kind of a hybrid. There's a knowledge vault with a lot of recorded trainings on pretty much everything from time management to clutter to managing paper, email, making decisions, communication. You know, every area of your life is affected by ADHD.
Right.
And then we meet on Zoom once a week. I
Hmm.
do about a monthly live masterclass, and then
Okay.
we have accountability. The other times, we always share a win and a challenge. So I kind of hot seat people with their challenges. It's a small group. I keep it small on purpose. And then there is a VIP Facebook group where they can interact with others. So it's a great program. It's 6 months long.
Okay.
Also have courses. I have a course called the Productive Professional,
Oh,
which is 4 module self-paced course. And so
okay.
if people aren't, ready to do a whole coaching program, that course is a good. I even have a $27 a month paid Facebook group called Focus and Flow. And in fact, I do a thing called Winning Wednesdays where they get
Okay.
extra tips that I have a free Facebook group, but the paid people get extra. They get live Q&A and they get the
Okay.
Winning Wednesdays. So,
Okay.
and I have a lot of other courses. I even have a course for teachers on how
Okay.
to teach with peace. So lots of, self-paced courses in
That's
addition
great.
to the coaching program.
No, that is great. I think that that's something that a lot of people need to hear. I think it's something that can affect positively a lot of people's lives. Where can these folks find you? Is there maybe a website or a LinkedIn, or where can we find you?
Yeah, I think you're going to put some of my links on your show notes, but
Yeah.
on Instagram, I'm CBC underscore Cindy Baker Coaching.
Okay.
And my website is cindybakercoaching.com.
Okay.
I think you're going to put the link to my Facebook group in there.
I'll
It's
put
a
whatever links
long
you want.
name. So
Yeah, that's no
um,
word.
my email is cindy@cindybakercoaching.com. And
Okay.
I will also give you a couple of links to some free resources. I have
Okay.
a free little mini course on how to
Okay.
avoid procrastination
Okay.
and a PDF download on my top 15 ways to be productive as an entrepreneur. So all
Okay.
ADHD friendly strategies that I think would really help your listeners.
Okay, well then we will give that a shot. Absolutely. We'll shoot that over. I'll have that in the description actually, because I remember we talked about this. I'll
Mhm.
put that right
Awesome.
there in the description so people can see that and have that ready to go. Cindy, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on board and getting you out and doing some of this stuff. So thank you so much for coming out, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Awesome. Take care.